Here you go.
Geraldine will be very happy.
Right. So we're up to a new Mishnah on page 8.
8B1.
8B1. Thank you.
You're welcome.
At the very, very bottom of the page in our English translation. This takes us to another subject, which we've had a little bit of mention before about because it was connected to discussions about ritual purity and impurity. And now we'll have more of a discussion. So a little bit of a warning. This is a little bit esoteric. It's a little bit out of our common experience. And whenever we get to it in the Torah readings, we have to, just, go along with it. And we don't necessarily get, and I'm speaking for myself as well, we don't really get very clear about what's going on. And it's notorious that the text is very hard to understand, because the text is trying to describe, before we even get to what you do about this phenomenon, it's trying to describe a phenomenon in words that is a visual, physical phenomenon. So it's about a skin affliction, and about a particular kind of skin affliction that renders a person ritually impure. But the skin affliction could look like a normal, if you could say such a thing, a normal skin affliction, which is just a skin affliction. It's just, go to the doctor. But there's a certain kind of skin affliction, which is called tzara'at, which we translate as leprosy. Every time we talk about it, we always mention it's not leprosy. But this tzara'at renders a person ritually impure. But if there's just a little change from the way it looks, then the person is not impure. And the only person who can decide whether this is the case, whether this person that is afflicted is suffering from plain disease, as plain skin disease, or is this person being afflicted by this ritually significant disease. No other afflictions are significant ritually. The only person who can decide this is not a doctor, but the high priest. So this is what the Torah talks about, and it's very hard to follow what the Torah is saying. And then on top of following what the Torah is saying, because the Torah talks about these possibilities of it looks this way, but maybe it looks this way, maybe it looks only a little bit this way, but then. So it actually also creates a process where uncertainty is recognized. And the status of the person who has some kind of affliction is an unclear status. And then the person is put into a waiting time, into a holding pattern to see how the process will continue to develop. And if the process develops in a certain way, then the person is declared to be a metzora, a tsarua, and will be ritually impure. But if the process develops in another way, then not. So there's a mysterious process involved. And then there's also, from a legal point of view, an uncomfortable situation of uncertainty. The law likes certainty, right? The law likes to, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stuart, but the law likes to make a decision, yes, no. You can talk about it as much as you want, but in the end, you have to make a determination. So here, the Torah actually codifies a period and a process of uncertainty. So that's a little bit of what our Mishnah will be talking about. Here is a person who has a skin affliction. Is there any legal difference? And for the Torah, for the rabbis, the legal differences, what are the consequences, the legal consequences in terms of ritual impurity or other things that follow from that? What are the consequences? Are there differences in the consequences between a person who is afflicted with this disease and it's definite that they have tzara'at, And what about a person who's only a suspected mitzorah, right? We have a presumption that the person might be a mitzorah, but we're not sufficiently clear about it yet, and the person is waiting to see. So that's the question. So let's start with 8b1, the Mishnah, with its introduction, which says a lot of what I was just saying, but also gives us some terminology. So who's going to read for us, please? Errol, thank you.
Actually, with that introduction, it sounded scary to read it, but
It's not good. This is not going to be an easy Gemara. This is not going to be so easy. I'm speaking personally. It's not one of the easier topics for me to get my mind around. Go ahead.
a mitzorah is a person affected with skin condition of tzirat, which must be evaluated by a Kohen. If the Kohen finds symptoms of this condition present, if the Kohen finds certain symptoms of this condition present, but others lacking, the mitzorah is isolated for a 7-day period, after which the development of the condition is observed and reevaluated by the Kohen. This period of isolation is known as
Hesger.
If initially or upon reevaluation, the Kohen finds the condition to be a definite case of tzirat, he pronounces the condition to be tzirat, a procedure known as
Hechleit.
Confirmation.
So Hesger is translated here as confinement. It also could be closing in or circumscribing or quarantining. If anybody's not familiar with that word quarantining, look it up in the dictionary. And then hechleit means definite, definitive, for sure, absolutely. So these are the two situations where the person is being treated in some ways as a mitzorah. And then the question is, so what's the difference between a full-fledged, absolutely determined mitzorah and a person who is in this suspicious holding pattern? Okay, so the we're going to see that there are many factors. What is a mitzorah has many limitations as being ritually impure, and also because the person is ritually impure, ritual impurity is contagious. It's communicative, and there are rules about how severe the ritual impurity is. We had this already last time when we were talking about the zav and the zaba. Mitzorah is considered practically the most ritually impure you can be, and it's allied with all ritual impurities, allied with the concern for the presence of death. But the creepiness, a dead person is dead. The creepiness of a mitzorah is that a mitzorah is like the walking dead, the living dead. So there's what would be saying, we would say there's this creepiness of the uncanny. It's like, oy, like this is a person, but on the other hand, it's not really the person as we would want a person to be. So there's a certain kind of extra queasiness that we have that's codified in the halacha. And a mitzorah conveys ritual impurity in ways that other sources of ritual impurity don't. So that's going to be part of the problem as well. So is the severity of the ritual impurity the same for both of these mitzoraim, or is that going to be different or not? Okay, so now we get to the Mishnah. Let's get to the Mishnah, and then we're going to start working out these things.
There is no difference between a confined mitzorah and a
confirmed.
All right.
One is confined, but not confirmed yet. and one is confirmed.
There is no difference between a confined Metzorah and a confirmed Metzorah, except with regarding to letting his hair grow and rending
And
garments. There is no difference between one who becomes tahor from a state of confinement and one who becomes tahor from a state of confirmation, except the requirements of shaving the hair and the bird's procedure.
right, it's all for the birds. So this is now, as you can see, a lot of notes on the bottom of the page to try to clarify what is being referred to here. So the Mishnah sets up, okay, there's the Metzorah who is in Hezger, and there is the Metzorah Musgar, and there's the Metzorah Muchlat. The Metzorah Musgar is the one who is confined. What does it mean that he's confined? Where is this confinement actually happening, or how does this confinement closing in, where does it take place? So look at note 9. Back on 8B1 at the bottom.
Okay, wait, I'm on the wrong page. A confined Metzorah is a person isolated by the Kohen because of a possible Sarat condition. For example, he exhibits the whitish spots of Sarat, but the hairs in this spot have not turned white, nor is there any healthy skin in the spot. Though his condition has not been confirmed, he is subject to most of the stringencies of a confined Metzorah, as the Mishnah proceeds to explain.
Right, so remember that the Mishnah says there's no difference between A and B except this, which implies there are so many other things that they have in common. So this is telling us that this confined Metzorah has many of the aspects of the laws of Tzaraat applied to him. But now, what is this confinement? Next paragraph.
The nature of this confinement is that the affected person is confined in a house for these 7 days. Others, however, explain that it is not the person who is confined, but rather the spot on the skin. That is, the Kohen draws a line around the suspicious spot so that he can tell at a glance at the end of the week whether it has grown larger, a symptom that would confirm the condition.
Okay, so this just again brings us into the murkiness of this procedure. 1 second, Josie. So a person has something wrong on their skin, something out of the usual. They come to the Kohen and they say, can you please look at this because this looks a little fishy. It looks like I have some kind of affliction. And the Kohen looks at it and can't quite determine, is it really absolutely Tzaraat or not? It looks like it's got some aspects of Tzaraat, but is it going to become Tzaraat? Is it Tzaraat? Is it not Tzaraat? So there's a 7-day quarantine period or a 7-day waiting period. And this is the confinement question. Is this person actually quarantined and confined someplace or not? The Torah says that the person actually gets thrown out of the encampment, right? Is exiled from the encampment. So, and that's the case also with the confirmed Metzorah. They're not allowed to be in the encampment of Israel. Remember, this is a law that's codified during the time when the Israelites are in the wilderness and they have this set up encampment, the machaneh, and he has to be michutz lamachaneh. And this then becomes the question, well, what does that mean? What's set up outside the camp? Is there a structure outside the camp that we can then say this person is going to be confined in? So some people say, no, he's confined. He's in some kind of enclosure. We set up an enclosure and that's where he is. But the other opinion says, once you get out of the camp, you're in chaos land. The camp is the gated community. The camp is the planned community. And outside the camp is the chaos of the regular world. So it makes no sense to say that a person actually is going to be confined anywhere out there. You can't confine them. So instead, they say, no, the person is actually a free-floating person. But instead, the confining is by drawing a line around the affliction on the person's skin. Two very, very different imaginings of what the Torah is talking about, which you're not going to have a lot of time to talk about here now, but it really bears noting that this is a very, as I said, a very bizarre situation. By the time the rabbis were dealing with it, it was not a reality anymore. They were convinced that it no longer happened, but they're drilling down into every single detail here and going into it, beyond the Talmud, into our own discussions right this minute, about something which has no tangible material referent. That's part of what makes this discussion a little difficult. So anyway, this person is in this 7-day holding period, and the priest will come back after 7 days to see what kind of change, if any, has happened to the patch or patches that are on the person's skin. And then the priest will then make a determination about whether the person is scot-free or whether the person is to be confirmed as a mitzorah. Okay, so now the Mishnah says there's that person, and then there's the person who's confirmed as really, it's clear from the get-go. The Kohen looks at the affliction, go, yep, that's tzaraat, that's the way it is, pure tzaraat, you're a mitzorah. Yeah, Josie.
Could you talk a little bit about why this is a ritual matter and not a health matter? Why nobody.
So I mentioned that very important distinction, and it's the distinction is really crucial. Health matters are part of life, right? We all are subject to feeling good, feeling not good. That's part of living. The Torah simply says, watch yourself, take care of yourself. I talked a little bit about the amazing period that we're in now, where we hope that each and every one of us will be able to get the vaccine that's going to protect us against the coronavirus. It's a mitzvah to watch out for yourself. It's a mitzvah to take care of yourself physically. But that's the details of any of that, the Torah leaves out, right? Just like the Torah doesn't give you a mitzvah to breathe. That takes care of itself, right? So the Torah doesn't tell you to eat, right? The Torah tells you a little bit how to eat. The Torah doesn't tell you how to breathe. But the Torah leaves vast areas of just plain living to the living. The Torah has, for some mysterious reason, and this becomes a whole discussion within the rabbinic literature, this one physical manifestation, the Torah says, is not an illness. It's something from God. And that's why it has a ritual significance, right? That's the difference. So, and the contrapositive, or whatever it's called, is that the illnesses are not ritually significant because they don't have a message from God. It's only this tzara'at affliction, which is considered explicitly this weird message from God about something. And the rabbis, taking it back to something that we talked about earlier this morning in Pirkei Avot, the rabbis were convinced that this has to do with sociopathic behavior, specifically with regard to speech. people that tear down the fabric of society by spreading gossip, by spreading false rumors, by spreading slander about people, that kind of insidious activity is specifically so abhorrent to God that God creates this public humiliation of the person by putting on their skin like a mark of Cain kind of thing. So that was the understanding that the rabbis gave to it, with a recognition, as I said, that God is not sending us the flu or coronavirus or a headache as a message. That's just part of being a physical creature. But this tzara'at, this is God telling us something and making us have to do a ritual, procedure involved. Many people have said, what's the person doing for the 7 days? The 7 days that this person is out in quarantine. What is that all about? Is it only because we need 7 more days for the physical development of the affliction? And they say, no, the 7 days are the days when the person is actually supposed to be doing some introspection and going, why am I being singled out in this way? Again, the opposite message is when you have any other affliction, no, God is not punishing you for something. It's just, this is the reality of what it means to live as a physical creature in a physical world. Things happen. Yes, Stuart.
I mean, so is the idea that there's an opportunity during that 7-day period for repentance, which might
Right.
lead to alleviation of the,
Correct.
okay.
Correct. Yeah, Sylvia.
On the other hand, is there not a possibility that there was concern that the entire community could be wiped out?
So this, we have these conversations every once in a while, you and I, and it's based on a long conversation that was engaged in by people before us. There is a long history of people seeing these kinds of biblical concerns as health concerns. I really don't buy it. I think that the evidence internally and externally it shows that that's not the case. We've talked about it in terms of kashrut. It's famous. Oh, you know why the Torah tells you that you can't eat pork? Because of trichinosis. It's just doesn't work. It just doesn't bear up to scrutiny. Everybody out there could make the same connection about whether people had trichinosis from pork or not, and they ate what they ate, and they didn't care. The Torah is, I don't think, creating ritual rules because of concerns of plague or sickness. With regard to tzara'at, again, there were any number of ways that people had plague concerns, and they're just simply not addressed. I mean, it's terrible. If there's a plague, then you got to be careful. And the Torah says, again, when you're sick, go to a doctor. So that's not the Torah's concern here. The Torah's concern is, if there's one minute difference in your splotch between this or that, either you are a mitzorah or you're not. If you're not a mitzorah and you don't have this ritual significance attached to your affliction, guess what? You still look disgusting. You're still in pain. You still might be contagious. You still might be a lot of things. And yet it's codified as being irrelevant.
One quickie follow-up. Does the Torah at any point discuss the concept of a plague of any sort?
Well, we have,
other than Egypt.
We've got plagues in the that afflict the Jewish people when they rebel against God. That happens in the desert as well. But those plagues are stopped by Moses interceding, by a special magical, brass serpent, like the American Medical Association, logo.
Serpent, right?
Yeah. So, a plague in the Torah, plagues happen based on divine displeasure, but they're not the plagues that we're talking about. We're not, the plagues that we think about are the bubonic plague,
Right.
the Black Death, the flu epidemic. Those plagues happened all the time also, but those were not the subject of interest for the Torah.
That's what I was wondering.
On the other hand, we had a whole tractate before this one about praying to God when there was famine and when there was, lack of water and so on, rain, where they said, well, maybe we are being told something. So there's a natural, there's a natural flow from this very limited kind of, treatment that the Torah gives to a greater sense of, well, we want to be on God's good side. What's happening here? Why isn't God happy with us? The Torah does, on the other hand, say, look, when God is happy with you, everything will be working well, and the rains will fall, and the crops will be bountiful, and so on. So there is a general kind of promise: if you treat God nicely, the world will be a happier place. If you rebel against God, you'll suffer. So there's a general kind of thing like that, but it doesn't become pinpointed in any kind of way, except in this very exceptional situation. Yeah, Jen.
So I just wanted to ask, and in general, like being impure doesn't mean being sinful, right? Like it's a mitzvah to bury to bury somebody, etc. So you can become impure or go through childbirth or whatever, and it has nothing to do with being sinful. But in this case, it is seeming like it isn't, like if you're sinning and becoming impure.
So again, in the Torah itself, it never says that being ritually impure is a sinful state. Nevertheless, psychologically, as I was saying just now, it's a natural thing for people to say, why is this happening to me? Why me? Right? And if you're living with a God consciousness, then it's natural to think that there's some kind of imbalance that has happened in your relationship with God.
Is this
But ritual impurity is a factor that has that is totally distinguishable from sin, right?
Right.
And then it's used sometimes metaphorically. Sin makes the land impure, or sin, you have an impure soul or something like that. But the real system of ritual impurity is factual. If you touch this, you're ritually impure. If you don't touch it, or if you're in the same room with a corpse, you're ritually impure. Like you say, I'm doing the mitzvah. I'm taking care of a mitzvah. Nevertheless, you become ritually impure. The priest that will make you ritually pure by sprinkling the water of the red heifer on you becomes ritually impure by doing that. Right? So it's not the priest is not doing anything, is not doing a sin. The priest is doing their job. They're doing a good thing. So ritual purity and impurity is its own system that has to do with actual physical proximity with a source of death. It's about recognizing the reality of death.
Why the period of like introspection? Like, why shouldn't they just be, off living their best introvert life while
So again, that's because that's the follow-up from the idea of why did the Torah or God create this one phenomenon that generates ritual impurity as opposed to all of the other physical ailments that we have. And therefore the conclusion was, well, this must be a message of displeasure by God. Therefore, take it to heart. And we're giving you time now to take it to heart. So it becomes, a step-by-step set of deductions based on the anomalous quality of this law. This is an exception. So what is the exception about? Why is there this exception?
Okay.
Sylvia.
Yeah, I'm just thinking it's really very curious. I don't know anything really about medicine or medical history, but we, the last few centuries, we had leper colony. Leprosy was treated differently for some reason that I can't understand.
So leprosy certainly was a horrifying disease. And it was, to a certain extent, this same kind of idea of a walking dead person. A piece of your body would fall off. And the famous thing is your nose. Your nose would just like get eaten away and fall off. Or your toes would just detach themselves and wither away and die. So it was like Halloween, but serious. So people had and it was apparently contagious. So people had a lot of terror about that and a lot of disgust. And terror and disgust are very powerful reactions, especially if you mix them together. So yeah, leprosy was considered a real issue for people. And isolating them was definitely in the cards. So that's why this is often called leprosy, because it seems so similar to the whole situation of leprosy. The problem is that the symptomology is not leprosy. What the Torah describes as what's afflicting these people is not leprosy. All the dermatologists and all the leprosiologists that know anything about the disease have already shown again and again and again that this is not a description of that disease.
What is it? What have they come up with?
It's not a known disease. And as I said, the rabbis, by the time of the rabbinic period, the rabbi said this disease doesn't exist anymore because it was specifically an affliction sent by God in a particular time. I mean, we have in the books of the prophets, we have records of people who were considered this kind of mitzorah that were thrown out of the camp. But but it didn't exist anymore by the time of the rabbinic period.
Well, you could think that perhaps because of this isolation, it burned itself out.
Well, leprosy didn't burn itself out. Leprosy, until we got modern drugs, leprosy was perpetual. Yeah, Stuart.
Well, yeah, actually, until well into the 20th century, there were leper colonies still.
Yeah,
right.
Leprosy hospitals.
Yeah. Just let me interrupt for half a second.
Yeah.
One of these days, when everything gets back to our wonderful world, and everybody goes to visit in Israel, there's a wonderful place in the heart of Jerusalem, and it's called the Hanson's Institute, and it used to be a leper colony, and now it's an arts center with a very nice coffee shop. So
isn't leprosy called Hansen's disease?
Yeah.
In Louisiana, there's a very famous leper colony, which is now a boarding school.
Uh-huh.
We have one at the Vineyard. There's a little island off the Vineyard that was a leper colony until 40 years ago, 50 years ago.
Yeah. So yes, I'm sorry I interrupted. Stuart, yes.
Yeah, I mean, just a couple of observations. One is, I mean, the whole question of, there's a huge literature on the idea of disgust and its moral content, and all of, you could make an argument that many of the sexual offenses are based in disgust, the concept of disgust. So incest or homosexuality or other kinds of behaviors that elicit that reaction. And so, sort of the liberal critique is that we need to be very careful about moralizing that, and that seems to be what's going on here. The other.
Well, I just I do want to just clarify. So, for instance, with regard to sexual offenses, we have the Torah uses the very heavy, loaded term of disgust, abomination.
Yeah.
which is an expression of disgust. That term is never used in ritual impurity issues. So it's just, you know, a literary note. Yes.
Okay. The other is more of a question. So it seems like you've presented this construct where, you know, there's sort of category, there are mitzvot, there are acts that are morally right and morally wrong, but then there's this in between, or this separate category of ritual impurity, which is not morally wrong or morally right, but just a separate but significant category. But then there are associated with all the kinds of impurity obligations, and that if you don't comply with those obligations, then you have violated the law. So if you don't,
the moral dimension comes into your obedience or disobedience.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, which is
Yeah.
the same thing like anything else. You know, it's
Like kashrut. I mean, kashrut is
like speeding.
Yeah.
I'm on an empty highway.
Yeah.
And I'm going, you know, 95 miles an hour in a 55 mile an hour place.
The legal term is malum prohibitum. It's wrong because it's prohibited, as opposed to.
And so right. So the moral question is not the act itself, is whether I'm, you know, choosing to disregard the legal system.
But I mean, that's the theory, but it blurs in practice because
Absolutely.
It's not so easy to maintain those distinctions. They overlap in
Correct.
significant ways.
Right.
Yeah.
And people don't always think so categorically. Right. Everything mushes together, for sure. And that's a big danger. But now we have, back to our Talmudic discussion, which we haven't made any progress in at all. We have an attempt actually to think categorically. What I mean by categorically, to think in categories, to think with these kinds of delineated, separate concerns and definitions. And that's exactly what this mission is about. Ein bain, there's no difference between this and that except the following, right? We're going to slice this difference, you know, in a certain way. So the confirmed mitzorah is a person who it's absolutely crystal clear. This person is what the Torah says is a mitzorah, with all of the legal consequences, and legal consequences in terms of ritual impurity, and also all kinds of ceremonies. So, and then the other one is a doubtful, pending, you know, further discussion mitzorah, right? Just to delay one more minute until we get back into the discussion. Ultimately, one of the questions that we're going to have is how do we treat the pendingness of this person's status? And what the Mishnah is saying is we're not saying that we don't know, right? If, you know, we have a person is innocent until proven guilty. So what happens when you're in the middle of a trial and the person is accused of something, but we haven't proven that the person is a criminal? What's the status of that person? Right? He's the accused so-and-so or something like that. What's the language that the newspapers always have to use?
Alleged.
Alleged, right. But is he guilty? He's not guilty yet, right? And depending on what the crime is, he may be scot-free, right? We have a certain confinement element in our legal system, but it has nothing to do with being a mitzorah. It has to do with, you know, are you accused of being a dangerous, threat to other people's life and so on. So, but here's a person who either is marked with a special mark, or is actually confined into a special space for 7 days, pending our determination. How do we see this person? Is this person just a person who's incarcerated, but for pending decision, or is this person presumed to be what he's accused of or what he's suspected of? So here the Mishnah says that actually there's only one difference or two differences between the one who is pending and the one who is absolutely definite. And that is letting their hair grow and tearing their garments. And then it goes on, there's no difference between one who becomes tahor, ritually pure, from the state of confinement, and the one who becomes tahor from the state of confirmation. In other words, you're confined, you are apparently considered ritually impure in some way. That seems to be the implication. Now, that's why we're going to get into a lengthy discussion in the Gemara. But it seems to be possibly, and I don't want to get into all the different, the possible differences, that so it's not so much you're innocent until proven guilty. In this case, you actually have moved over out of the status of being a normal, plain old human being to being some kind of semi-tsarua, right? Semi-mitzora, right? We'll see. Okay, so now what do they say? They say what the difference is, there's no difference except letting his hair grow and rending his garments. Okay, so let's look at the note 11, which quotes the Torah. Beryl, back to you.
The Torah commands, and the person is whom there is an affliction. His garments shall be torn, the hair of his head shall be unshorn, and he shall cloak himself up to his lips, and he is to call out, Tameh, Tameh.
Ritually impure, which is a way of saying, get out of my way. Don't come close to me. If you don't want to become ritually impure, then don't get close. Don't get close. Okay.
The Mishnah teaches that these requirements apply only to a confirmed metzorah, but not a confirmed metzorah.
Not a confined.
But not a confined metzorah, and that these are the only differences between their states of Duma.
Tosfot Yom Tov notes.
The confirmed metzorah is likewise
Confined. We have to be very careful here.
Mm.
Two different kinds, yeah. The confined metzorah
Notes that the confined metzorah is likewise exempt from the requirement mentioned in this verse of cloaking himself up to his lips, but the Mishnah mentions only the first two requirements.
Okay, so in other words, there are a number of behavioral consequences to being determined to be a metzorah. You can't cut your hair, right? And you have to tear your garments, and you have to go running around with your shredded garment wrapped around you and covering your mouth, and yet you're supposed to be calling out, watch out, I'm ritually impure, right? A little bit like masking today. So there's obviously a physical clarity of people will see such a person and they'll go, oh, that guy is a metzorah. Even if this patch is on his arm and he's wearing sleeves or something, nobody can see that the person has that skin affliction. They'll see that he has this skin affliction simply by the way that he's commanded to look. Josie.
I'm a little confused. We are not talking about contagion in the normal sense that we think of it now, that if you come near this person, you're going to get the skin affliction because it's something else.
You don't get the skin affliction, you get ritual impurity.
So that's your fear. You're staying away so you won't become ritually impure.
Correct. And you don't get the same ritual impurity. You get a lower level of ritual impurity, but it's still ritual impurity.
And you don't want it. Okay.
Right.
Officially, that's the explanation.
Right.
But how does it present itself?
How does what present itself?
The ritual impurity that is acquired.
You're not allowed to go into the temple. Foods that you touch will become ritually impure, and a priest will not be able to eat them. People that are related to the temple will not be able to engage in, come in contact with that, or engage in using the clothes or the food and so on, and also still be able to go into the temple. Ritual.
But how will that be marked on the person?
No. There's no marks. There's no anything.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Only the leper, possibly, according to one interpretation, has this mark to when he is impending a pending situation. If he's a definite leper, there's no marks. There's no extra marks. The marks are the shredded clothes, the fact that he's not cutting his hair, and his own personal announcement, which of course, again, that's part of what the rabbi saw as tit for tat, right? You were talking bad about other people, talk bad about yourself.
But he's hiding the physical marks of his disease.
Maybe not. I just said it could conceivably, it could be on his face. Could be anywhere. But even if you can't see it, you have these other clear indications that this guy is a Mitzorah, right? He's not going to be able to hide it. That's the point. Even if the physical rash, or whatever we want to call it, is hidden, he's not going to be able to hide it from the public. Okay, so what the Mishnah is saying, therefore, is that the one who's pending a final determination about whether they are Mitzorah or not, that person doesn't get this physical, external set of costume and so on, right? They're not going to be required to be involved in that. Okay. Then like we said, the second part of the Mishnah says, and then there's the purification process. And the Torah, and here also, the Torah assumes that anybody who is afflicted with tzara'at will eventually become purified, as opposed to leprosy, which was incurable in the old days. But the Torah assumes that when you get this definite disease, eventually it will go away. And then you will need to be restored to ritual purity. Every time a person becomes ritually impure, it doesn't just disappear by itself over time. You have to go to the mikveh. You have to do other rituals, like I said, sprinkling the red heifer ashes with the water and so on. And there's an elaborate ritual having to do with the Mitzorah also. So that's what's talked about in the second half of the Mishnah. There's no difference between one who becomes ritually pure, tahor, from the state of confinement, and the one who becomes ritually pure from the state of confirmation. So let's look at note 12.
That is, a confined Mitzorah who was reevaluated by the Kohen and pronounced free of Sarat, for example, because the spot did not grow larger, turn the hairs white, or develop a patch of healthy skin,
etc. Right? So that's the one who is confined. And then the next one is the confirmed one, and that's 13. He was cured of the tzara'at, quote unquote, cured. The tzara'at is no longer there. So I just want to point out, the fact is that the second one, the confirmed Mitzorah, definitely was a Mitzorah. That's what it means. He was confirmed. It was clear. He was definitely afflicted with this phenomenon that makes him ritually impure. And then it goes away. But now, in order to become ritually purified, you have to go through a system of ceremonies. But what about the one who was confined? The one who was confined, we weren't sure if he had ritual, if he had leprosy or not leprosy, quote unquote, tzara'at. What happens if after 7 days, the priest comes and looks at him and says, no, you're lucky, you didn't get it. It's not really tzara'at. So logically, one could argue, okay, so that means that you were never rendered ritually impure. We weren't sure whether you were ritually impure. We couldn't tell. That's our problem. But eventually we figured it out, and you were never ritually impure. In which case, go home, and forget about it. Nevertheless, what we have here is a requirement that the person undergo a ceremony of ritual purification. He has to go to the mikveh. So that indicates that there is some kind of quasi-ritual impurity simply by being suspected of being a metzora, right? Even though we've determined at the end that he wasn't, right? That's a little anomalous. And that's not entirely clear. This is, of course, our reading of the Mishnah. It's not entirely clear that that's really, in the end, what everybody thinks is the case. Okay. So, all right, then what do we have here? Except requirements of shaving the hair and the bird's procedure. So what is that all about? Number 14.
14. The Torah requires a metzora who is pronounced cured of his sarat to shave all his hair and to have 2 birds brought.
Remember, while he's a metzora, he can't cut his hair. Now, when he is reinstated as no longer a metzora, we have the opposite. We go to the extreme, and all of his body hair, not just his head hair, not just his beard, all of his body hair is shaved. Go ahead.
And to have 2 birds brought to which the procedure described is performed. The Mishnah teaches that these requirements apply only to a confirmed metzora who is pronounced cured, but not to a confined metzora who is pronounced free of sarat, and that these are the only differences between their purification procedures.
So what's left? The immersion. Okay, go ahead. After shaving.
After shaving the bird's procedure and the immersion in a mikveh, the confirmed metzora must also wait an additional 7 days, shave again, and bring a series of sacrifices on the 8th day. However, the Mishnah does not mention that this additional 7-day period does not apply to the confined metzora because it is a function of the shaving requirement, which the Mishnah has already stated does not apply to him. The Mishnah also does not mention that the series of sacrifices is not required of the confined metzora, since the Mishnah focuses only on the differences that apply on the day that the metzora is pronounced free of sarat. The sacrifices, however, are brought 8 days later.
8 days later. So this is again and trying to answer. The Mishnah seems to say this is the only difference between A and B. This is the only difference. And in the end, we know that there are other differences. So now we've got trying to answer, well, the Mishnah left out certain other differences because it's focused very, very laser focus on this particular situation right now. And that's why it doesn't mention the other things. But you're right, the other differences are also differences. So this is part of the trickiness of interpreting this Mishnah. We're going to go into the Gemara soon, and the Gemara is going to say, oh, there's only this difference. That means that all these other rules apply to both cases. That's an inference that we're going to make. Nevertheless, there are clear situations where that inference does not work and where there are differences that are not mentioned in the Mishnah. So we can't infer simply because of the fact that the Mishnah doesn't mention it, that therefore they both have certain laws in common. We know that there are certain laws that they don't have in common and the Mishnah doesn't mention it. So the Mishnah is actually a little bit shaky as a text from which we can derive all of our information. Josie, you wanted to say something?
All of this is written his, he, him.
Yeah.
Any of this apply to women?
Good question. With women, there are other places that discuss this. A woman does not go around with torn up clothes and messed up hair and so on. That's wasn't considered appropriate for a woman in public, and it was by reading the verse a certain way, women were excluded from those kinds of requirements.
But
So they weren't that kind of humiliation and degradation wasn't applied to the women.
But they did have this,
But they did become
quarantine-
ritually impure. They did become ritually impure, and they did have the same standard question of isolation or not, and the sacrifices and so on.
I
Yeah.
see.
Beryl, you wanted to say something?
Well, I have a question that's probably irrelevant, but there's this part that says the Kohen draws a line around the suspicious spot. I mean,
Maybe.
they didn't have markers,
Sure they
so
did. Sure they did. They
like
had,
a Sharpie, like, I mean,
no, not a Sharpie,
drawing.
but they could, we see, for instance, decorations, henna, right? People that decorate their skin with all kinds of, like, at marriage ceremonies. We've seen it to this very day, in North Africa, in Jewish and non-Jewish ceremonies, body decoration, mascara. Mascara was applied. They didn't use Sharpies for mascara. Eyeliner. You had a little brush, and you dipped it into a little bit of dye, or dark, or colored something, and then you made you drew a border around whatever the rash was. So yeah, it didn't have to be. Now see how spoiled we are. How spoiled that we think we need a Sharpie. Nah, it was so much nicer back then, right? It was much more painterly.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it's almost like a ritual, the drawing.
Yeah,
like,
well, that's
anything
okay. So
that
that's
gets-
an important. Yeah, that's a good point. This is given to a ritual expert, not to, like I say, not to a physician, not to a shaman, not to anybody else. This is given to a priest. It's a ritual act. Now, I just, again, wanted to say, this is all speculation. We're not sure whether that actually was done or not. That's one interpretation of what it meant to confine the rash. You confine the rash by putting the guy into confinement, or do you confine the rash simply by drawing a line around the rash? It's two different interpretations. Okay, we're going to make it into the Gemara. Yes?
Oh, good, the print gets larger so I could see it.
Does it? I can't tell the difference.
I can, it's much smaller on the notes. The
Oh, in the
Mishnah-
notes, it's a little more condenser. Yeah.
The Mishnah states that letting the hair grow and rending the garments is the only difference between a confirmed and a confined metzorah. But with regard to sending the metzorah out of the city walls and all the stringencies of tumah that apply to a metzorah, both this confirmed metzorah and this confined metzorah are identical.
Okay, so now we're getting into the real treatment of the ritual impurity itself. And according to this inference, the Gemara says, well, the Mishnah says the only difference is about these externals with regard to how the two people, the pending guy and the confirmed guy, how they have to look and how they have to comport themselves when they walk around. But that means that in terms of ritual impurity laws, it's the same. So the ritual impurity of a metzorah is so severe that they get thrown out of the camp. Well, apparently the pending guy also gets thrown out of the camp. And not only that, but then what about all of the things that this person comes in contact with? Since this person is a concentrated, intense source of ritual impurity, there are all kinds of extensive possibilities of his making other things ritually impure in ways that less severe situations don't do it. Does that apply to the confirmed one and to the pending one? The answer is yes. So that means, again, that guy who we're not really sure whether he's a metzorah or not, we determine in the end, right, that while we're not sure, nevertheless, everything that he does will render certain things impure. What are those things? So look at, what is the number here? The number is 16. See the details. There you are. Okay, so they don't even want to go into it. Okay, so for instance, if you sit, this is very analogous to what we had before with the Zav, with the person who had the discharges, the genital discharge. If you sit, Mishkav or Moshav, if you sit on something, and then everything underneath you becomes ritually impure. So remember the princess and the pea? So there's like 50,000 mattresses, one underneath the other, underneath the other. All of those mattresses get ritually impure, or all of those rugs, or throwings, or whatever you want to call, whatever those things are called. Anything underneath you becomes ritually impure, even though you didn't touch it, simply by lying down upon it. So that's weird. That's unusual, but that's the severity of this ritual impurity. It applies to a zav and it applies to a metzora. Those two cases only. Then you have also what's called tumat heset. Tumat heset, we're going to get to it later. Tumat heset means moving something. So for instance, the way that ritual impurity usually is conveyed is by touch or proximate presence, right? If I walk into a house where the corpse is inside that room, then everything in that room becomes ritually impure. If I am a metzora and I walk into a room, I make everything ritually impure. What if I don't touch a pot? If I touch the pot, it becomes ritually impure. What if I don't touch the pot? What if I shake the table and make the pot move? The pot becomes ritually impure. So the power of this ritual impurity works across space in this kind of like a very, very weird way. And that's, again, unusual, and it only applies here. And now what the Gemara is saying is, apparently they have it in common, since the only difference the Mishnah mentions is the clothing and the haircut and the running around yelling, watch out, watch out. That means that the ritual impurity laws themselves do apply even to the pending person. Yeah, Jen.
I know that you can purify pots and so on. You can bring out your new pots to the mikveh or whatever, but how do you purify your beautiful woven rug? Like, what happens after that's impure by one of these cases?
Why can't you throw it into the washing machine?
Like, you could just wash it and that made it pure?
Well, not wash it, but why can't you throw it into the mikveh?
Okay, I didn't know if that was, like, I never thought about it in terms of stuff other than, what about the heavy, like, the heavy furniture you have?
Pottery cannot be purified.
So that's just all gone. Like, you lose everything that, and like any big, like, is that include
No, well,
big
again,
furniture?
it depends what the ramifications are. As I said, it's all about temple related. Today, it's assumed that all of our utensils are ritually impure, and that we are eating ritually impure food, and there's nothing we can do about it. And
Okay.
It doesn't really make a difference because we're not going to the temple.
Why do you bring new stuff to the, well, not you, but why do people bring new stuff to the mikveh to?
So, okay, so I'm sorry that you brought that up.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But I'll say what I want to say. I am totally against that practice because that practice has nothing to do with ritual impurity. That practice has to do with racism. The only new pots, metal pots, and utensils that you have to bring to the mikveh are utensils that were not made by a Jew.
Oh, okay.
If they were made by a Jew, then you don't bring them to the mikveh. That doesn't have to, no matter how new they are. The practice of bringing all those other things is to wash away the cooties of being made by a goy.
Okay.
Which I find to be morally reprehensible. Talk about disgust. And I've had many discussions with my colleagues about that, and some colleagues agree with me and some colleagues don't. And it's a whole legal discussion whether this is a custom or whether this is actually a law. So I insist that it is a practice that should be absolutely never practiced.
Rabbi?
It has nothing to do with ritual impurity. Yeah, Rich.
So that raises the question, when I've been to kosher restaurants and got wine, that they wouldn't allow non-Jews to serve the wine.
Yeah, that's a different story, slightly. I mean, it's related, but that's a different story. That was created originally as an anti-idolatry rule, which is not the same thing as cooties, although some people might say it is. The idea was that you shouldn't have wine that was produced by non-Jews because they're producing it for ritual purposes, and they're dedicating it to their idols, and you shouldn't use that kind of stuff and benefit from it. And then when there was a suspicion, you could even call it maybe a little bit of a paranoia, that when they're pouring the wine, they're pouring it with their own, in the name of Baal or whatever other idols that they worshipped. So there's a whole long, I mean, it's a whole tractate, Avodah Zarah, the idolatry that talks about the ins and outs of that problem. And then what happened was that as a fence around the law, they outlawed any wine touched by a non-Jew. So that was the result was that even wine that was produced by a Jew, which had therefore we assume not been produced for the sake of idol worship, nevertheless, if the non-Jew comes in afterwards and is going to start pouring it, then so they made a rule about that. It actually it has its own complicated history. So that's where that comes from. And the conservative movement has passed the tshuva that dispenses with that rule and says that that's no longer a rule that we follow today. Okay, we're gonna end here, and Happy New Year to everybody. Secular Goyish New Year, but we're all counting that way as well. And all good things to everybody. Hope I'll see you next week.
Yasher Koach.
Thank
you.
you. Bye.
Happy New